The dispatch call wasn't for a robbery or a high-speed chase. It was for a sound, a thin, desperate cry that was being systematically swallowed by the blizzard raging across the county. Officer Miller gripped the steering wheel of his patrol SUV, the heavy-duty tires crunching through the rapidly deepening snow. Beside him, Koda, his German shepherd partner, was a statue carved from shadow and tension, his golden eyes fixed on the white chaos outside, his ears swiveling like radar dishes, trying to pinpoint the source of that phantom sound. They arrived at the coordinates, a desolate stretch of road bordering a thick, snow-choked forest. The wind howled with a physical force, stealing the breath from Miller's lungs the moment he stepped out of the vehicle. It was a wall of white noise and biting cold. "I can't hear a thing," Miller shouted over the gale, pulling his collar tighter. But Koda was already moving. He didn't just bark. He unleashed a sound that ripped through the storm, a deep, resonant command that made even the seasoned officer freeze in his tracks. He wasn't alerting to a threat in the distance. He was pointing, his entire body rigid, his snout aimed directly at a small, unassuming mound of snow just feet from the road, a place Miller would have walked right past 100 times. What on earth was he so fixated on? What Koda would drag from that icy grave would ignite a mystery that baffled the entire precinct. But it's what he did after the rescue, in the quiet, sterile hours that followed, that would leave every single person who witnessed it in floods of uncontrollable tears. Stay with us right to the end, because this incredible story of loyalty and intuition goes deeper than you could ever possibly imagine. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone whose heart needs a little warming today. And I'm always so curious, where are you watching this story from? Let me know your country in the comments below. I absolutely love seeing how far our family spreads across the globe. "Koda, heel," Miller commanded, his voice muffled by the wind. But the dog didn't even flinch. It was the first time in their 5 years together that Koda had so blatantly disobeyed a direct order. A flicker of unease went through Miller. Koda wasn't just a dog. He was a highly trained K-9 officer. His instincts were his weapon, his senses a tool more precise than any piece of human technology. If he was this insistent, there was a reason. Trusting his partner over his own senses, Miller trudged through the knee-deep snow towards the spot. Koda was already digging, his powerful front paws sending plumes of white powder flying into the air. He dug with a frantic, desperate energy that was almost frightening to watch. Miller dropped to his knees beside him, his gloved hands joining the effort, scooping away the densely packed snow. "What is it, boy? What have you found?" His fingers brushed against something soft, something that shouldn't be there. It was fur, cold, stiff, and terrifyingly still. Working faster, they uncovered the shape. It was a puppy, a tiny ball of fluff, no bigger than Miller's 2 hands put together, its fur matted with ice. Its eyes were closed, its little chest unmoving. Miller's heart plummeted into the pit of his stomach. They were too late. The cold had already claimed this tiny, innocent life. "Oh, no," he breathed, the words turning to vapor in the frigid air. He reached out to touch the puppy, a wave of profound sadness washing over him. But as he did, Koda let out a soft whine and nudged the tiny body with his massive, wet nose. And Miller saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible puff of condensation at the puppy's nostrils. A breath. There was no time to think. Miller scooped up the frozen creature, unzipping his heavy tactical jacket and tucking the puppy inside against his chest, trying to share his own body heat. "Come on, Koda. Let's go," he yelled, turning and running back to the warmth of the SUV. Koda was right on his heels, his barks now sharp and urgent, as if he were commanding Miller to move faster. Inside the vehicle, Miller cranked the heat to full blast, directing the vents towards his chest. He gently rubbed the puppy with a spare blanket from his emergency kit, his movements careful, terrified of breaking something so fragile. Koda had pushed his way into the front, his head resting on the center console, his eyes never leaving the small bundle in Miller's jacket. He whimpered softly, a continuous, low thrum of anxiety and concern. It was a sound Miller had never heard him make before. Back at the station, the news of the rescue spread quickly. Officers gathered around as Miller continued his efforts, using towels warmed in the microwave to slowly raise the puppy's temperature. It was a little girl, a mix of something with scruffy, cream-colored fur. She was starting to stir, her tiny limbs twitching weakly. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. But Koda's strange behavior was only just beginning. He refused to leave the puppy's side. He established a perimeter around the box they had made into a makeshift bed, allowing only Miller to approach. When another officer, Sergeant Davis, reached down to offer a comforting pat, Koda rose to his feet, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest. It wasn't aggressive, not in the way he would confront a suspect. It was a warning, a clear, unmistakable message: stay back. She is mine to protect. Davis chuckled, holding up his hands. All right, big guy. He's gone all Papa Bear on us, Miller. Miller just shook his head, a frown creasing his brow. This was more than protective instinct. This was an obsession. He watched as Koda lay back down, his body a solid wall of muscle between the puppy and the rest of the world, his gaze unwavering. What did he know that they didn't? The decision was made to take the puppy to the emergency vet clinic. Dr. Evans was efficient, professional, her movements swift and practiced as she examined the tiny creature under the harsh fluorescent lights. She listed the potential problems: hypothermia, frostbite, dehydration, organ damage. The prognosis was guarded. I need to get her into an incubator and start her on warm fluids, Dr. Evans said, reaching for the puppy. And that's when Koda acted. He moved between the veterinarian and the examination table with a speed that was shocking. He didn't bark, he didn't snarl. He simply stood there, a silent, immovable guardian, his body language screaming a defiant no. Officer, you need to control your dog, Dr. Evans said, her tone firm but not unkind. Koda, it's okay. Let her help, Miller said, placing a hand on his partner's back. Koda looked back at him, his eyes filled with an emotion so complex, so human, it took Miller's breath away. It was a plea, a desperate, silent appeal to trust him. After a tense standoff, Miller finally convinced Koda to allow the vet to take the puppy, now tentatively named Angel, to the incubator. But Koda refused to leave the room. He lay on the cold linoleum floor, his nose pressed against the clear plastic wall of the incubator, a stoic sentinel on a lonely vigil. The hours bled into a day, and then another. Angel was slowly improving, but she was incredibly weak. And Koda's behavior grew stranger still. He refused to eat. He wouldn't drink. He wouldn't sleep. Miller brought his own food, his favorite treats, even a juicy piece of steak from the diner next door. Koda wouldn't so much as look at it. His focus was absolute, his entire being concentrated on the tiny creature fighting for her life behind the glass. Sergeant Davis stopped by the clinic, a cup of coffee in hand for Miller. You know, this is getting a little weird, man, he said, gesturing towards the unmoving German shepherd. He's going to make himself sick. It's just a dog he found. He's projecting. You need to get him out of here, let him reset. Miller felt a sliver of doubt creep in. Was Davis right? Was he anthropomorphizing, reading too much into a dog's instinct? He was exhausted, running on caffeine and worry. Maybe his judgment was clouded. But then he looked at Koda. He saw the intelligence in those golden eyes, the unwavering conviction. Koda had been right about the puppy being in the snow. What if he was right about something else now? And then he noticed the pattern. Every few minutes, Koda would get up, walk to the side of the incubator, and gently, persistently, nudge one specific spot on the glass with his nose. It was the spot directly over Angel's left hind leg. He would nudge it, whine softly, and then look back at Miller, his eyes burning with an intense urgency. What is it, boy? Miller whispered, kneeling beside him. What are you trying to tell me about her leg? He brought it to Dr. Evans' attention. He's obsessed with her back leg, he explained. The vet sighed, clearly trying to be patient. Officer, I've examined her thoroughly. We took x-rays. There are no breaks, no fractures. There's some minor bruising and swelling, which is completely expected from the extreme cold. He's just fixating on the only visible injury. It's a common canine behavior. She showed him the x-rays. They were clear. Miller felt a fool. Of course the vet was right. He was just a tired cop letting his emotions get the better of him. He apologized, feeling the weight of Davis's skepticism on his shoulders. But Koda would not be deterred. His nudging became more insistent. He started pawing softly at the glass, his whines growing more frantic. He was trying to tell them something vital, and they were all too blind to see it. Miller decided to stay. He had a cot brought into the clinic and set it up next to the incubator. He wasn't going to leave his partner's side. If Koda was on a vigil, then so was he. He tried to get Koda to rest, pulling the dog's large bed next to the cot. But Koda refused, choosing the hard, cold floor, his body a constant, reassuring presence for the tiny puppy. As Miller drifted into a restless sleep, he remembered the day he first met Koda. He hadn't been a proud police academy graduate. He'd been a rescue, found chained in a backyard, malnourished and scared. Miller had seen the same fire in his eyes back then, the same fierce intelligence and unbroken spirit. He had fought for Koda, rehabilitated him, and together they had become the best team on the force. Koda had saved his life more than once on the job. Miller knew, deep in his soul, that he owed this dog his absolute trust. On the third day, Angel took a sudden turn for the worse. Her breathing became shallow, her heart rate erratic. The monitors beside her incubator started beeping with an alarming frequency. Dr. Evans and her team rushed in, their faces grim. "Her system is failing," Dr. Evans said, her voice tight with urgency. "There must be an undetected internal injury, something we missed. We need to prep her for exploratory surgery, but honestly, in her condition, she's so small, she might not survive the anesthesia." Panic seized Miller's chest. He looked from the struggling puppy to his partner. Koda was on his feet, his body trembling, his whines now escalating into heartbreaking cries. He was watching his little charge slip away, and he was helpless to stop it. Davis had arrived, putting a hand on Miller's shoulder. "Miller, maybe it's time to let go. You've done everything you can." But Miller couldn't, not when he looked at Koda's eyes. In that moment of absolute desperation, as the veterinary team prepared their surgical instruments, Koda did something that silenced the entire room. He let out one sharp, deafening bark. It wasn't a cry of distress, it was a demand for attention. Every head turned towards him. The great dog stared directly at Dr. Evans. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he lay down on the floor. He stretched out his own powerful left hind leg, the same leg he had been pointing to on Angel. He nudged his own leg with his nose, and then let out a long, mournful whine, looking pointedly from his leg to the incubator, and then back again. He repeated the action. Once, twice, 3 times. It wasn't a random fixation anymore. It was a pantomime. It was the clearest, most intelligent act of communication Miller had ever witnessed. The air crackled with a stunning realization. Miller's voice was thick with emotion, barely a whisper. "It's not the bone. He's not telling us it's broken." He looked at the vet, his eyes pleading. "He's telling us it's something inside the leg. Check the circulation. Check the artery. Please." Dr. Evans stared, her mouth slightly agape. All her training, all her scientific knowledge, told her this was impossible. And yet, she couldn't deny what she was seeing. The sheer intelligence, the desperate attempt to bridge the species gap and communicate a life-saving message. Sergeant Davis stood frozen, his skepticism melting away into pure, unadulterated awe. Nodding slowly, the vet grabbed the Doppler ultrasound machine, a device used to listen to blood flow. It was a long shot, a complete Hail Mary based on the intuition of a dog. She applied the cold gel to Angel's tiny, bruised leg and pressed the probe to the skin. The room was utterly silent, the only sound the frantic beeping of the heart monitor. Then, another sound joined it, the rhythmic whoosh-whoosh of healthy blood flow from one part of the leg. But as Dr. Evans moved the probe slightly higher, up the femoral artery, there was silence. A dead, terrifying silence where a powerful pulse should have been. "My God," she breathed, her professional composure finally shattering. "There's a blockage. A thrombus. A tiny blood clot, probably formed from the trauma of the cold." It was a 1-in-a-million diagnosis, a ticking time bomb that hadn't shown up on any X-ray or been detectable by a physical exam. It had been slowly cutting off circulation, releasing toxins into the puppy's tiny body, causing systemic organ failure. Koda hadn't been fixating on a bruise. He had somehow sensed the lack of blood flow, the coldness in the leg, the very thing that was silently killing her. He had known all along. Tears began to stream down Miller's face as he sank to his knees and wrapped his arms around his partner's massive neck, burying his face in his thick fur. "You knew," he sobbed, his body shaking with relief and overwhelming love. "You knew the whole time, boy. I'm so sorry I didn't understand." Koda just licked his face, his tail giving a single, exhausted thump on the floor. His job was done. He had been heard. Angel was rushed into emergency surgery to remove the clot. It was a delicate, microscopic procedure, but with the exact location known, it was successful. The moment she was out of surgery and back in a recovery incubator, Koda finally ate. He devoured an entire bowl of food and then curled up on his bed and fell into a deep, profound sleep. The story of Koda's incredible diagnosis spread like wildfire through the department, then the local news, and then the world. He was hailed as a hero, a miracle dog. But for Miller, it was something more. It was a profound lesson in trust, in listening to the silent language of the heart, and in recognizing that the creatures we share our lives with possess a wisdom that we are only just beginning to comprehend. Weeks later, a healthy, boisterous Angel was officially adopted by Miller. She was a whirlwind of puppy energy, but she never strayed far from her giant, gentle guardian. They were an inseparable pair, a testament to a bond forged in the heart of a blizzard. Often, Miller would sit on his back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky, with Koda on one side and Angel curled up on the other, fast asleep on Koda's paws. He learned that the most important calls aren't always the ones that come over the radio. Sometimes, they are a quiet nudge, a persistent stare, a silent plea from a loyal partner who sees the truth long before we do. What Koda did reminds us that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that the greatest wisdom often lies not in what we can see, but in what we are willing to feel. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Thank you for being a part of our family. We'll see you next time.